So when a sequel to A Quiet Place was announced, I was really interested in where we were going to go with the original story, what we were going to do with these characters and the world we built. And A Quiet Place Part 2, at least the way it starts off, chooses to go about this in a really interesting direction, in my opinion, where it really just shows you the background of what happened before you got to the first movie. It's kind of showing John Krasinski and his family at a ball game while there's some explosions, obviously leading up to what we are at now. But it really is the initial, like, day one version of the movie we're going to be getting in a couple of days, which shows you a little bit of a precursor of what's happening, what happened to the town, how the things got so bad. Something I thought was really interesting, and I kind of wish they would have stuck with it a little bit more, because it gives you like a 10 to 15 minute taste of what you got, then it kind of jumps you right back into the first one. When the flashback ends and this movie it picks up right where the first movie left off. It's completely linear. You're with Emily Blunt and her children on the farm. They just had the encounter with all these creatures, way more to come because they made a bunch of noise at the end of that one. I'm really happy that they make the characters branch out and go in the world in this one, not stay at the farm again, because we did that in the first movie. We don't need to do that again. Let's add something, build on the world we already have from the first one. Really like that. And with that, you're going to kind of meet a couple of new characters, some new additions to this world that go on to be in this movie and apparently in the next one, day one. So really interesting to see how that expands. I think they add something fresh to the movies. And when this family is branching out of the farm into the complete unknown, they no longer have John Krasinski there to kind of look after them. You kind of really do feel bad for them. You feel like they're pretty helpless because none of them's really trained. They're not familiar with the terrain or anything. This is apparent by one of the kids stepping on a bear trap immediately upon leaving the property. And as you're watching this entire predicament play out for this family, you get to see it through the form of a sniper scope. So you know there's another survivor somewhere in like the rafters. He's poached up. He's the one who put the traps there. They're on his property. What makes this opening scene interesting to me is the creature basically hears the boy scream when he hits the trap. And they actually fight back in this one because now they know the weakness a little bit, the way the sound interacts with them. It's interesting to see it from another survivor's perspective because obviously nobody else really knows the weakness of these creatures. You have another survivor now who kind of feels like he has allies he can help assist. They have a weakness to attack these monsters. Just a different approach from the first movie where they're just completely defenseless running. Now they know a little bit of a way to fight back. The guy who comes down, he helps him save them. You go on to find out that's Cillian Murphy. And I think we're all in agreement at this point. If you just have a pretty simple premise of a movie, maybe it's a post-apocalyptic movie, you need to elevate a movie. It's just a very simple premise, but you need a guy with a lot of on-screen acting chops, a lot of time. Let's get Cillian Murphy. This dude's absolutely phenomenal. It's super cool to see how this guy's career has kind of trajected from the 28 Days Later series to what we get now with this guy. He's just an absolute standout in everything he's in. That's definitely one of the glaring standouts of this movie for no fault of John Krasinski. I said he was really good in the first one. I think there's layers to this. I think Cillian Murphy's in a completely different tier than he is. I mean, Cillian Murphy, just any movie he's in, I don't think I've ever seen a movie this guy's in that I either didn't like the movie or I thought he was bad in the movie. He stands out in this movie by far, the limited time he's in. The only person who really rivals him, in my opinion, is the deaf daughter. I think she's phenomenal in this as well because she's on screen a lot. Where the first movie feels really claustrophobic, like it takes place all in one spot, this movie doesn't. It feels really like it's kind of two movies broken into one because you're spending like a lot of time with two different sets of characters that are not around each other. You have Emily Blunt and her son. They're back home trying to survive the creature. All of their encounters, the struggles with that. But the real important part of the story takes place with Cillian Murphy and the deaf daughter, and they have a cool little dynamic going on because he doesn't speak sign language and she can't hear, so they really can't communicate that well. But the point of what they're trying to do is they're going on this little mission. They're embarking to try to find a boat to get across sea. They're trying to get to this radio station because they have this idea. They think if they can get to this radio station, they can use the hearing aid kind of frequency that backlashes to the creatures. They can project it across all the sound waves. They can make themselves some headway when it comes to this little war on these creatures. And I really enjoyed the dynamic these two have in this movie. You spend a lot of time with these two. They're kind of bonding over their differences. It really does have like a Last of Us vibe, kind of a little bit, if you've seen that show, play that game, where you're just hanging out with these two. They really don't have anything in common, but he's watching after her. And it's a cool little story arc for him because when they first encountered him at his place, you know, the family, he basically didn't believe in anybody. He basically thought people were irredeemable. He said people are not worth saving. He thinks they're savages. But through his ability to kind of help her, it's kind of his like redemption arc where he feels like he has a purpose again. Just kind of a cool little contrast to The Last of Us, some of those survival shows. I liked it. Something that will definitely stick out to anybody who saw the first one going into this movie is how much less strict the sound rules are. And you know, there's obviously pros and cons with that. I kind of discussed that in my first review. But overall, I definitely think it's a pretty big positive that they kind of let up a little bit in the seriousness of it. While it does stick to the general themes of being quiet, I'm glad they didn't just absolutely repeat the first movie and make it super claustrophobic, no sound whatsoever. It's just sign language, things like that, because we already saw that in the first one. I wanted to see something a little bit different in this movie. Glad they give it to us. I'm glad that they let up a little bit on the rules of sound so they could have a little bit more fun, bigger set pieces, the bigger scale of stuff. I feel like they really, like I said in the first review, really gave themselves such a thin margin. They really handicapped themselves so much into a box that it's really kind of nice to get out of the box, breathe a bit, have some more fun in this one. That's not to say this movie is not tense. I definitely think this movie is tense, but it's not as much as the first one in my opinion. This one's just more fun. There's more like big moving creature parts. There's more moving set pieces where they go different areas. But the first one is just so tightly wound. You really can't breathe at all in that one. This one just lets up a little bit. I'm kind of a fan of that personally. I'm assuming it's because of the budget, but the CGI in this one's definitely significantly better than the first movie as well. I was a fan of the creature design in that movie. I thought they looked pretty good. I think they're significantly better in this one though. The close-ups they have of the ears, the crawling in the background, I just think it looks a lot better. There's definitely a lot more scenes I would say are exciting, where there's a lot more creature action, chases, loud noises, explosions, things like that, which kind of set it apart from the first one where it's so tightly wound, so claustrophobic. For me, again, I kind of prefer that method because it's more fun, it's more rewatchable that way, even if you kind of do lose some of the tension. While you're bouncing around and the action's happening, you're going to some new areas, you explore the water, you go to an island, you meet a character that's going to be in the new Day One movie, kind of see the origins of what he was like. You just get to bounce around a lot more, explore more of the world. Fan of that. All that being said, though, again, just like the first movie, I didn't think this movie was perfect by any means. I don't think it's without flaws. I think there's some definite standout kind of weird choices to this movie. One of the weirdest choices and tonal inconsistencies being that some of the characters don't wear shoes, but I don't really think shoes make that much noise if you walk quietly. Cillian Murphy's character is like the only guy who's smart enough to walk around in a pair of boots. All the other characters are like walking around on train tracks, broken glass, barefoot. And it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, they're on a pair of shoes, they're not that loud. My most noticeable gripe by far with this movie, though, is I don't think it really goes far enough in terms of branching out from the original, even though it is significantly different. You don't really find out that much about Cillian Murphy's character. You get to know him, he elevates, he does what he does, he's awesome. But it could have went a little bit farther. When I explore this topic, I'm thinking somewhat along the lines of like The Walking Dead. You're going to meet these different groups of people, see how they survive. You only really meet like a group or two that are different outside of Cillian Murphy. It doesn't expand that much. Again, just a little bit of a letdown. When you do finally get to the conclusion of this movie, I don't find the ending to be amazing or anything. It's not terrible, not super rewarding. Again, I understand why they ended it the way they did. A little bit of a letdown, though. I think they could have went a little bit farther at the ending as well. Minor gripes. I still like the movie. But yeah, if you were a fan of the first movie, you would definitely like the second movie. I think this movie's well acted as well. I think Cillian Murphy's awesome in everything he's in. A lot more action in this one. I think this one's a lot more fun than the first one, personally. They're both different in their different ways. But just like the first one, I think this is a movie you can definitely do worse than. Have you seen this one or the first one? If you've seen these movies, what's your favorite movie in the franchise? Comment down below. Let me know. I'm going to put a link to my other reviews in the Quiet Place series I'm doing up here if you want to check those out at any point when they get put up. If you haven't subscribed already, what the hell are you waiting for? I do it all on this channel. New releases, scary stuff, movie rankings, tier list, all of it. So join me down below. That's all I got in this video. Peace.